Big thanks to Napoleon Grills for sponsoring this episode.
This might be the easiest thing that you've ever made and taste like something really good. Something really good. I don't know. Cupcakes. Cupcakes, whipped cream with a cherry on top. And then better. Of course, you can see that these are ribs, but these are not general ribs like you buy them if you buy, for instance, St. Louis style cut ribs or baby back ribs. These are ribs as they were meant to be. This is waste for the butcher. All the meat has been cut off all the way clear to the bone. And that's how you recognize cheap ribs. These were from my own pigs and I told the butcher, please take all the meat off and just give me the waste. Because personally, I think those are the best ribs. Let me show you why. It starts with 2 cloves of garlic. I'm gonna take my chef's knife and chop it fine. Next up, a red onion. When diced fine, I'm gonna put it in my mortar and grind it fine with my pestle. Once ground fine, I'm gonna add some nutmeg. That's about half the nutmeg nut. In goes a tablespoon of salt and half a teaspoon of fresh ground pepper. Mix it up once again. Once it looks like a brownish puree like this, it's time to give it a try. Wow, that's intense.
Boom. Wow.
Flavors are so intense, and that's why for 3 of these little ribs I only need, well, that totals up maybe to 3 tablespoons. Oh, but it's so intense. Heftig, hè? Ik deed iets te veel in mijn mond hebben. Then I'm just gonna rub this onto my ribs. Make sure I get a little bit of it everywhere. And don't worry, I didn't forget to take off the membrane. This is the way these ribs need to be cooked. With the membrane on. These ribs are ready to be cooked. I'm just gonna leave them for a couple of minutes while I fire up the barbecue. To fire it up, I'm gonna first take out the grill grates. And there you see my charcoal trays. I can lower the charcoal trays with a handle. And that way I can control the amount of heat that gets onto my ribs. And because I'm gonna grill the ribs and not smoke them, I'm gonna use a light charcoal. This is going to burn very light, very fast. And that's exactly what I need in the case of grilling ribs. I'm gonna mix in a few briquettes just to spread out the heat and let it burn a little longer. To light it up, I'm gonna use some embers from my little fireplace. Of course, you can also use some fire starters. And lower the charcoal bed. Now, if you don't have a grill like this, and you, for instance, have a kettle grill, don't worry about it. You can still do this. But the thing that you need to think about is just spreading out the charcoal, not putting in too much. Use a light burning charcoal so you don't get too much heat, and maybe just have a safe zone where you can just put your ribs in case of the fire getting too hot. I got a light heat coming from my charcoal bed, so that means we're ready to go. I can keep my hands here forever and ever. And that's a good thing because I just want these ribs to come up to temperature very slowly. You'll see later on that once that fire detects that there's a little bit of grease and fat, we're gonna have all kinds of twirls and smokes and maybe a little bit of flare up. And the heat is going to go up in the grill and we're gonna have that beautiful crunchy outside. Since I'm gonna be grilling my ribs, I'm gonna need as much surface as I can to get a beautiful crust on. So that means I'm gonna take these ribs and cut them up into what I consider to be bite sizes. 2 of these are going to be a portion, so once grilled they're going to be ready to go on the plate. I'm going to put my ribs on and I'm going to give them a little bit of time first to warm up, to start rendering down that fat, and that's going to be around 20 minutes or so. And now you can see what I was talking about. We have a little bit of browning, Maillard effect from the heat onto the ribs, and I can clearly see that the front ribs were getting a little bit more heat than the ribs that were laying in the back. And that's why you gotta stay close, flip them around, figure out where your hot spots are, where your cold spots are. So now I've got them turned around. I'm gonna give these a little time to brown up as well. And then we're gonna put these towards the back and the other ones towards the front so they cook evenly. You can see that they start to brown. We got a nice bit of Maillard effect on these ribs. Really starting to look good. And the membrane did its job. If I would have taken that off, it wouldn't have been protecting the meat and keeping the inside more moist. The membrane works 2 ways. It's protection as well as it lets moisture through. Now here it's starting to get hot. We got a little bit of sear marks on it, but we're getting flare-ups over there. That means the fat's rendered down, dropping into the fire. So I'm moving it away from the hottest part of the grill to a more colder part of the grill. And I'm taking another rib, which hasn't been touched by the fire just yet. So I'm gonna move it to the hot spot. And that's how I'm gonna do all of these until I got a nice bit of Maillard effect on them. I've been grilling now for around half an hour and all of my ribs look freaking amazing. The red is from the smoke color, the browning is the Maillard effect. Ribs are starting to pop, which means they're almost done. Time to move them to a colder spot on the grill and just let them chill there. All these ribs with their buddies hanging out in the corner. I'm closing the lid and I'm gonna give them a few minutes. And with a few minutes, I mean around 20 or so. This is about all of that meat slowly relaxing a little bit and at the same time starting to cook. We got the browning, we got the Maillard effect, we got the flavor on. Now it's time for the ribs to cook. And once the ribs are hot enough, I'm gonna take some aluminum foil, just lay it down and put the ribs on. Look at those beautiful ribs dripping with their own juices. Fat that's been rendered down, a crust that's been built up from the meat. This is the best stuff. If you could just smell this, the spices that I put on are just freaking coming at me. I'm just gonna wrap it up. Let's just hide this stuff. And when in doubt, add another layer of aluminum foil. Now it's well packed up. I don't want any of the moisture and any of the heat escaping because that's what's gonna cook these ribs. And therefore, I'm gonna put them in a hot bag. This is an insulated bag that I get when I order my meat, and it's also perfect to store food warm into. So I'm just gonna let this sit aside for at least half an hour, but preferably up to an hour or an hour and a half. Time to make some herb butter. Of course, it starts with a whole pack of butter. 2 twigs of parsley, chopped fine. 2 cloves of garlic. 1 red onion. A teaspoon of fresh ground pepper. And 2 teaspoons of salt. Let's check back on the ribs. Super excited. It's like a birthday. Ooh. Whoa. They look freaking amazing. And if you could smell what I'm smelling at this moment, you would freak out. Your mouth starts salivating, you're starting to twitch and itch, and you want to dive into it and start grabbing these ribs. And I actually might just gonna do that right now. Look, let me show you first. Look. They tear apart, which means grilled ribs are tender, just like ribs that are smoked. There's nothing wrong with grilled ribs. Now first I'm gonna do like a test version, so I get 2 bites, one with butter and one without. There we go. Oh my God. That is good. Now with butter. I must admit, the pity is that there's way less meat than with real big ribs, smoked ribs. What is left on these bones is just so satisfying. Oh, man, this stuff is amazing. With butter, even better. I like this better than smoked ribs. I'm just gonna say it. This is better than smoked ribs.